Tech billionaire Elon Musk is making a dramatic intervention in British politics. Musk dialed into a right-wing anti-mass migration pro-free speech rally organized by Tommy Robinson in London this past weekend. Now, he had a clear message for the crowd and for the country. Let's watch.
There's got to be a change of government in Britain. And you can't, we don't have another 4 years or whatever the next election is. It's too long. Something's got to be done. There's got to be a dissolution of parliament and a new vote. If the fight comes to you, you don't have a choice. You have to fight. So you have to rally all of the people of Britain to fight for the future.
And he added this. Let's take a look.
Violence is going to come to you. You will have no choice. You're in a fundamental situation here where whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die.
This isn't the first time Musk has weighed in on UK politics. He's previously clashed with government over grooming gangs and the Online Safety Act, legislation that he called, quote, a threat to free speech. His comments come just ahead of President Trump's upcoming state visit to Britain. It also marks 4 years away from the next scheduled UK general election. Now, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer didn't mince his words in the response to his comments. He writes, quote, people have a right to peaceful protest. It is the core to our country's values. Britain is a nation proudly built on tolerance, diversity, and respect. Our flag represents our diverse country, and we will never surrender to it, those that use it as a symbol of violence, fear, and division.
Well, some of that rhetoric from Elon there, whom I love, was a little too edgy.
Thank you for saying that.
You should not set out or plan to engage in violence. Obviously, if you are the victim of violence, you have the right to defend yourself. You should not be the initiator of violence. And that message was a little muddled, I thought. Overall, he is arguing that there should be a change in the British government for a very specific reason, and one I do agree with. The British authorities are trying to strangle, cripple, destroy the tech platforms in Britain, in Europe. The European Union is doing the same thing. This has prompted a lot of discomfort between Elon Musk and other tech leaders and European leaders. This online safety legislation that UK is going through will get rid of the anonymous part of the internet. You're going to have to register. It is a blow to free speech.
No, that'll be great for the 50,000 people on that list that Republicans are pushing through about Charlie Kirk. They'll get exactly who they are and exactly that matches with their ID. They'll know exactly who's saying these things. Maybe it'll tone down the rhetoric that they want to get people fired for.
Yeah, see, I don't want to do
that. But I mean, that's exactly in line with what the party's pushing for. It got to be. I mean, if this is what all Republicans are pushing for and he's pushing a conservative message in the UK, it should all be on one accord. It's kind of like the same.
Republicans aren't pushing for that. Well, there are some
Republicans that support Charlie Kirk, who was arguably the most influential young person in the Conservative Party, right?
Private entities assembling their own list of whatever. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, can the government require the internet, the platform, to provide information on who the people are who are using the platform? That is in the U.S., that would be a First Amendment issue. We would say no. They don't have the First Amendment, so they can do it, but I still think it's a bad thing. I don't think the government should force social media companies, give us information. Who are your people? We want to put your people on watch lists. I mean, if I assemble a watch list.
Wait, we just talked about watch lists last week.
The government should not assemble watch lists.
Have a watch list of people that aren't even criminals in New York, and Mom Donnie is against that. And you said, what's the problem? Keeping folks safe, a couple names on a list. What's the problem? Keeping the internet streets safe, a couple of names on a list.
Again, the difference is that was publicly available information.
From social media. So why not collect it properly and publicly make it available to the government in the UK?
If the NYPD had gone to Facebook and said, give us the messages that these suspected gang members have sent to each other, then I would obviously, of course, first in the US, they have to get a warrant to do that. If we passed a law saying that Facebook had to give the NYPD private internal correspondence Facebook messages, that would violate the First Amendment. That I would be against. This is a database of publicly available information. What they're trying to do in Britain is require private information that is not just available on the social media platform effectively to be given to the government. And that's what I'm against. It's what Elon Musk is against, and he's right to be against it. It's on civil libertarian grounds. And just more broadly, there's too much bullying of the tech platforms by the European Union and by the UK authorities that I think is bad.
I'm against Elon Musk's whole rhetoric, jumping on a Zoom with thousands of people in the audience and saying you either fight back or you die. That's a quote. And I'm against that vile type of language, especially from him in the wake of what just happened with Charlie Kirk. I think that is irresponsible and I think poor-minded to figure out. And he also talked about Charlie Kirk in that conversation he was having with that audience, saying the left causes, and like, you are inciting violence by using that type of language when you know that there is a conversation about figuring out getting to the bottom of this, and you are a leader by all standards who has worked closely with the U.S. government, who's going there trying to just rally people up just to fight for your tech cause because you don't want certain restrictions, and you're comparing that to the death of somebody who was shot from a criminal act. Like, I don't think it's the same.
It's not inciting violence.
He's saying, like, fight back or die. Like, those, if your life's on the line.
Fight back is not inciting violence.
Well, you're making words mean other words, similarly to what you just told me I was doing in the last segment. No, fight back or die.
Fight back.
So what does that mean? Be violent? What is it? I don't know. He's saying these people are violent. Like, he's actually saying, like, it's life or death. Like, not in a suggestive, like, esoteric way, like in a real way.
We should kill this person under these circumstances, and here's how we'll do it. That's inciting.
And also a bigger issue is Elon Musk is trying to be involved in every single country's politics. He literally left the Washington, D.C. with his tail tucked, a failed mission, abort mission by all standards.
He presides over
he tried
a global company.
I know he tried to implement policies, they didn't work, and so you're going to go to the UK, try to get people on your side to implement policies. Maybe you're better off just lobbying the government as opposed to trying to rally up people that are going to go out and vote. Maybe just go to the government and have conversations like lobbyists have been doing at big companies like yours forever. You see what Facebook's doing with our government. It seems like it's working.
Elon Musk's Starlink was providing internet to the Ukrainian resistance fighters. That was out of the kindness of his heart.
Wow,
and now they
want
to, that was a great thing that he did. And they want to bully him and make his companies less profitable and make people suffer under greater censorship, their own people. He has the right to object to that.
Fine, he can, but
He's
he shouldn't say compare it to every single thing else that's happening in the world in regards to violence from the left. I think he should just say, hey, I don't want these type of restrictions on my company. Just use smart language for a grown man that's responsible for his words.
He's allowed to say that the left is violence, that the left endorses violence. I'm much more careful about drawing connections between rhetorical strategies and actual violence, but the left says this about the right all the time, that they're, I mean, yeah, you just said it.
I'm just saying,
violence.
Yeah, on the heels of what just happened, I don't think that now would be an appropriate time to tell people, oh, like, get more enraged. It's like, listen, how about all leaders try to figure out how to tone this down? I mean, coming from President Trump and everyone else, like, this is the time to try to unite people and actually push forward policy.
Vote out the government. That was his actual ask, which that's fine. We should vote out the government. Voting out the government is your right, is your civic right.
But people will not die. People will not die if they won't. People will not die if they don't vote out the government. That's my point. That people will not die if they don't vote out the government. Just like no one else died when Trump became president again. You know, we're here and he's president and life went on. So that's what I mean. Like, it's all the Democrats were dramatic when people said, "Oh my God, it's life or death," and like it's going to be like, oh, like, you know. It wasn't. We're just going to go through 4 years of a presidency. It's not the worst of times. We're not in a world war.
I think he thinks crime would be lower. In the UK, we've seen some videos of assaults of children and violence and those kinds of things.
And all that has to do with the policies he wants pushed forth
refugees
on
from
technology.
the Middle East. And so a more immigration restrictionist or anti-refugee government of the right, Elon Musk thinks would make the islands a safer place.
A very self-serving Elon Musk, very gracious man, as you name some of the things that he's done for Ukraine, but very self-serving. Elon Musk, he uses strong words when he wants to get some legislation passed that benefit his company so he can continue to be the world's richest man.
That's the great thing about capitalism, Lindsay. Providing services to other people is enriching for the soul and for the bottom line, and we can all profitably find ways to serve one another and also benefit ourselves, and it's good.
And if it was an experiment to have Elon Musk in the U.S. government that failed so miserably, perhaps he should just look at that and say, maybe take a break before doing it a few months later in another country. Just take a break.
Stick to sports.
Yeah.
That's your advice.
Exactly.
Brian Kilmeade apologized over the weekend for comments that he made during a segment on the death of Irina Zarutska last week. Fox co-host Ainsley Earhart was discussing how someone who's been arrested 14 times, well, they should be put in prison, and Lawrence Jones added that if such people refuse services, they should be locked up in jail. Then Kilmeade weighed in.
Billions of dollars to mental health and the homeless population. A lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
That comment sparked backlash online, with many pointing out that a large number of unhoused people, homeless people across the country, are veterans.
Now, some online also compared his comments to former MSNBC commentator Matthew Dowd's controversial take following the death of Charlie Kirk, saying that Kilmeade should face similar consequences. Now, over the weekend, Kilmeade offered his apology. Take a look.
We were discussing the murder of Irina Zarutska in Charlotte, North Carolina, and how to stop these kinds of attacks. During that discussion, I wrongly said they should get lethal injections. I apologize for that extremely callous remark. I'm obviously aware that not all mentally ill homeless people act as the perpetrator did in North Carolina, and that so many homeless people deserve our empathy and compassion.
But that apology seemed to fall flat with some. Former Surgeon General during Trump's first term, Dr. Jerome Adams, took to X saying, quote, "I appreciate the apology, but Brian Kilmeade's apology falls short. A fair and balanced network can't tolerate a seasoned reporter casually suggesting we execute the mentally ill and homeless. Suspension is the bare minimum. Accountability matters, or it doesn't."
I think it was correct to apologize, and that should be that. He's someone who has opinions. I think he was trying to suggest that that a mentally ill homeless person who committed a crime as serious as this person who stabbed this woman, Irina Zarutska, on the train and caused her to bleed to death in seconds or minutes, that person deserves to die. If he gave people the impression he thinks the homeless people should just be rounded up and killed, that's obviously incorrect. They should get treatment. The question is how you get people who want to refuse treatment the help they actually need. And I agree with what Lawrence Jones was saying, is that we're going to have to consider more, I've said this before, coercive methods, but not killing them for noncompliance.
Yeah, I think you're being really lenient with your perspective on what he was saying. They were having an open conversation about dealing with the crisis, and his co-host just kind of sat there as he said, "Let's lethally inject people," and then reiterated after he was done, like, kill them. And I think that just shows the lack of empathy, I think, as a country that we have for the homeless population, as we talk about even things like what's happening in DC. Let's get them out of here, like, just out of sight, out of mind. But a lot of these people are not killers. In fact, studies, like one published in the National Library of Medicine that I read yesterday, shows that homeless people are generally more times the victim of violent crimes than they are the perpetrators. Like, if the whole population
They're victims of other homeless people.
They are the victims of violent crime. So I didn't get into the
violent crime are the homeless people.
No, I don't think each other. I'm saying the percentage-wise, based on the whole population and based on homeless people, are the victims of violent crime. And so the point for me is that they are often the ones that are the victims as well, and also not all needing specific remedies that we have put forth. Some of them actually just need housing. Some of them actually just need to figure that solution out. Like,
not here
we can't start we can't start with the one solution that's like give them medicine, but not talk about the overall structural change that gets people into homelessness. And that starts with a lot of unaffordability and some policies that we have. I mean, there's a disconnect on how to get to the end game, but the conversation we're having is like kind of up here. And
I used to think that because I grew up in suburbs of Detroit, and when you'd go into the city and I'd see homelessness, or it was poverty driven. When I moved here to Washington, D.C., I realized that the poverty here, the homelessness here, is not poverty. Usually it's mental illness or drug addiction. And so just throwing homes at people, they do that. In this city, you can easily get a home for a mentally ill homeless person, but they don't stay in the home because they need to be where their drugs are, on the streets. And they wreck the home environment anyway. So you need to treat, in my view, most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, you need to treat the underlying drug addiction or mental illness first, or else giving them a home is not going to do any good.
Yeah, and have people in place that are not thinking like Brian Kilmeade. and thinking about real long-term solutions.
Right, we can't just kill people, although in response to the kind of violence, I mean, we still have the death penalty in some places. You might very well be executed for the kind of behavior we saw there.
On the train, for sure. We're specifically talking about the train incident.
Yes,
right.
I think that's what we were talking about. Attorney General Pam Bondi is vowing to target anyone who is engaged in, quote, hate speech in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death.
Now, Bondi is facing heat from across the spectrum over her comments. Here she is on Katie Miller's podcast yesterday.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
Fox News' Britt Hume wrote on X, someone needs to explain to Ms. Bondi that so-called hate speech, repulsive though it may be, is protected by the First Amendment. She should know this. Bondi, however, took to X to defend herself this morning. She wrote that hate speech that crosses into violence isn't protected by the First Amendment and that the era of calls for assassinations and cheers for political violence are over.
Meanwhile, the suspects in Kirk's assassination, Tyler Robinson, is set to appear in court today. FBI Director Dan Bongino revealed that based on Robinson's digital footprint, he had, quote, an obsession with Charlie Kirk. Bongino also said that Robinson displayed multiple warning signs before the shooting. His coworkers, for instance, said that he detached himself when politics came up and would walk away. Here's the FBI Director Kash Patel on Hannity last night with more information on the suspect.
But I will say what was found in terms of information, a text message exchange where the suspect specifically stated that he had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and he was going to do that. And when he was asked why, he said some hatred cannot be negotiated with.
Moreover, the Washington Free Beacon's Aaron Sabarium's reporting that the FBI is investigating social media posts that appeared to have some sort of foreknowledge of the assassination. The Free Beacon writes, quote, the post, one of which referenced, the date of Kirk's assassination, September 10th, more than a month before it took place. They were all deleted in the days following the killing. Several of the accounts appear to belong to transgender individuals, and at least one of them did follow the suspect, Tyler Robinson's roommate, with whom Robinson was allegedly in a relationship on TikTok. So that is real interesting information. Now, I want to urge some caution here because I saw one of them, but was an account that says every day says something bad's going to happen to Charlie Kirk, something bad's going to happen to Donald Trump, something's bad. So if you say that every day,
then, yeah.
This is how magicians win in those little games where they'd say, does someone in the room have a relative whose name is John?
Starts with an L or yeah.
Right, it's law of probabilities, you eventually get there. Now, it could be, however, though, that the suspect, Tyler Robinson, talked about doing this with these people, transgender individuals. His roommate/lover is alleged to be a transitioning individual, so that's possible. And if people had foreknowledge, doesn't necessarily mean they were involved, although they cough had some duty to warn, although maybe they thought it was idle talk. Who knows? So definitely has to be looked into.
Right.
Could be less than meets the eye, is all I'm saying.
You, myself, and our producer, Louis, were talking about this yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's some fake account making it up. But I looked into it, and now that they're investigating, it actually is very scary. So I think that they should look at anybody that was connected, especially if they're following anybody related to the shooter, because that's something that you want to make sure that people are not complicit in this.
That would be too much
if he acted alone.
of a coincidence.
It just seemed very coincidental, and stuff like that makes me uncomfortable. I think my bigger issue is even when you look at this and step back at every information that we have now, it's like people are still trying to connect this to this leftist ideology, and that's the bigger goal for them, rather than finding out if there are 5 people involved that helped him, 1 person, or figuring out what group to pin this on. So I think the more information that comes out about who he was dating, to me, matters more to people than why a killer killed someone. And I think that we have to just change the conversation into what this criminal did and prosecuting him to the further extent of the law, as opposed to how we can tie him so close to another political party. And the reason I say that is, if you remember, a decade ago when Dylan Roof shot all the black worshipers in South Carolina at the church, President Obama was there, and he did not tie any of those actions to the Republican Party. It's a leader's responsibility to, no, he didn't go up there after the shooting or even weeks after the shooting and say, this is Republicans' fault. Like we're seeing a lot of leadership.
Maybe he didn't. I saw plenty of assertions
I didn't ask
in
about
mainstream media that this is the fault of right-wing rhetoric or Fox News or all of that.
Well, he was trying to say that he was trying to, incite a race war with his actions because he feels that black people were taking over white people, again, space in this world, and having conversations like many politicians do that are about the great replacement theory, or that is happening in some form, including J.D. Vance, including Trump, including Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, then that becomes uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's not their fault that Dylan Roof went in there and shot up those worshipers. Right. That's a racist man who committed a crime. And so I think that we have to make sure we're differentiating when people do criminal acts and have major issues. We need to prosecute them to the fullest extent of our law and find a way to bring the country together to say we condemn this violence. We appreciate civil discourse, but we condemn this violence.
Well, and to what Pam Bondi there, what she was saying about hate speech, which was nonsense, and everyone called her out for it, including a lot of people on the right. I'm going to read a rebuttal to what she said. Hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. You know who said that?
Who?
Charlie Kirk.
Wow.
So she got that one really wrong. And then when she said it's only, I just meant violent speech. Well, okay, specific threats of violence. If you say we should kill this person and here's how we're going to do it and when, that loses protection. That's what the Supreme Court has said. But just calls to overthrow the government, general, vague, harsh, violent rhetoric is not illegal or unconstitutional. So
and I found it odd that J.D. Vance went onto the podcast last night and hosted it and didn't find a way to try to bring people together and not say that the worst of us online that are saying these things are the worst of the country, but most people he's seeing are saying that was a terrible tragedy. And I think that was a moment for the vice president of our country to do something a little bit different, but also
he said no
not call to cancel.
With those who call for violence.
But also he's calling to cancel people on a platform where you're saying the man who created that platform wouldn't have called to cancel people. And those same people weren't called to be canceled that had somewhat or suggested racist that George Floyd needed to die. These same people should lose their job. If we're going to comb through everything negative that employers don't morally align with who they're hiring, we got to go through everything. Well, you can't start at Charlie Kirk.
Between saying he calls for J.D. Vance, you can disagree with this, but J.D. Vance called for the cancellation of people who justified or glorified or celebrated violence. If people, I think the George Floyd.
Some people celebrated the violence from a police officer to that man.
Should have gotten killed, and it was good that he got killed. Yes, there's plenty of
negative comments under my post specifically to try to go and get them all. No, about he deserved to die. He's a drug addict. These are all things that I got on X, is what I'm saying.
I think what you got was, I could be wrong. I think what you got was pushback from the idea that it was the police officer's fault, which I don't agree with, or some criticism of his. I mean that he had multiple run-ins with law enforcement. He had threatened a woman. That kind of thing is different from saying he should have died or that we're happy he died. Popular streamer Stephen Bennell, also known as Destiny, well, he got into a very heated debate with Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks on the Piers Morgan Show.
The two were part of a panel discussing Charlie Kirk's death and suspected assassin. Now, Morgan asked Destiny, who's pretty left-wing, whether he condemned the assassination of Kirk if it turned out Robinson was in fact of leftist bend. Here's his response.
If it turns out to have been somebody with a leftist ideology who wanted to shut up Charlie Kirk, would you condemn that?
I won't condemn anything until the President of the United States can go on air and say, all of us need to calm down.
That's when Kasparian jumped in and things got a bit chaotic.
Why is your behavior contingent on Donald Trump?
I'm insane right now.
Why is your behavior contingent on Donald Trump?
Let me ask a question.
Because he's the President of the United States of America and the leader of the
Destiny.
You have a huge audience of young men who listen to everything you have to say. So when it doesn't matter. You have a huge audience.
Destiny also got pressed for an Instagram post where he seemingly mocked Charlie Kirk's widow. Specifically, he accused her of fake crying and also laughed at the fact that Erica Kirk tagged Charlie in a post mourning him. Here's Destiny defending his actions.
I just don't understand it. That's it. I don't understand it. I don't understand you, Destiny. You have so much hatred in your heart, and at the same time, you judge
such a simple thing.
others
If you're
as being
going to
hateful.
weaponize somebody's grief against the other party, well, then of course people have a right to fight back against it. I think that she has every right to grieve in whatever way she wants, but when that grief is going to be weaponized to do recruitment, political recruitment, and further radicalization of the other side, then of course you not only have the ability to mock it, I think you have the obligation to mock it. It's insane.
Destiny then went on to troll conservatives on X by pretending that he had been banned on Twitch yesterday. On X, he posted a screenshot of an email from Twitch saying he was banned, along with the caption, "Unreal, Elon Musk and other conservatives just got me banned from Twitch. My entire income's gone now. So much for the party of free speech." Bunch of social media users fell for this, including me, actually. I thought that was the first time he'd been banned. But now a community note said Destiny had already been banned from Twitch in March of 2022. And we described him as left-wing. I'm sure, though, if some left-wing people are watching, they'll say we hate Destiny, too, because he's kind of, he's definitely progressive, and he's loyalist to the Democratic Party, but he's like very hawkish, very pro-Israel and very pro-Ukraine. He's kind of like a neoconservative Democrat. Anyway, he's completely loathsome, and I would rather be drowned in battery acid than spend 5 seconds talking to him, because you can see there how obnoxious and bad faith and repellent he is. So kudos to Anna Kasparian. Love her, my girl, for wanting to being willing. I'm sure she didn't want to, but being willing to get down in the mud with him. I think his comments were pretty vile. But also kudos to Piers Morgan for having debates between people who actually disagree and letting them go at each other. And, people like us can decide how we feel about it. But what you can't condemn political violence because you don't like everything Trump says is just you've poisoned your own mind at that point.
Right. And I think that's the thing. Working in the media space, what you call mainstream media, what is, a space where I've learned how to tell a story, how to take a beat if someone passes away, to discuss the death and the life, and then take a beat and discuss anything else that requires nuance. I think there's a certain decorum that you just don't expect podcasters or people with digital platforms to have anymore. And so in some ways it's beautiful because they freed themselves of the institution that is a lot of big magazines, outlets, newspapers, television stations. But in other ways, it's terrible because it just allows the worst of the worst commentary to go unchecked. And there is some, I think, baseline of how you should probably react to certain things. So if there's someone explaining that this and this and this happened, would you condemn it? That should be a simple yes. And that shouldn't defeat your entire point about what you're saying. There's a way to disagree and also say something is wrong. And I think he feels like he lost the argument once he says something is wrong. And there's still two things can be true. It would be ideal if President Trump could stand tall in this moment, the way that I referenced yesterday about when Dylan Roof went into the South Carolina church and killed people of color. President Obama stood tall in that moment and tried his best to bring the country together in that speech, in that moment, trying to figure out a way to uplift and connect. And it would be ideal if President Trump could find a way to uplift and connect and not try to point fingers immediately, the same way that we shouldn't be saying the negativity the minute that the man passes away, right? There's just a decorum expected of that office of president. And so to me, that's the part that bothers me the most. And I don't think that he's articulating that well by doing the same thing that he's expecting, like bad character and bad judgment that shouldn't beget bad character and bad judgment. He's just leaning into what he's criticizing so much.
Will you condemn violence? Well, the other side is more violence. It's just say, I condemn violence.
Right. And so, I think when I watch this, I'm happy that there's more dialogue. Like you said, Piers Morgan is having these conversations. But it's also frustrating because a lot of young people, I think I'm struggling with this. I think even in the past 2 weeks specifically because of how much negativity I see online, but what I believe to be true about my human experience. Walking around talking to people about Charlie Kirk, walking around talking to people about the incident happening on the train. Right, online just seems like it uplifts and pushes out the worst of the worst on purpose because it's salacious, and then that thing will get 1 million views.
Well, because it's our I've said this on a couple different platforms, so apologies if this is repetitive for people who watch me other places, but social media is your inner monologue. I've come around to this idea that everybody has dark thoughts from time to time, and you don't act on them, and it doesn't define who you are. You just you're intrusive. You know, I'm not trying to project my own psychology onto other people, but I think that's the case. And social media allows you to vent what you just shouldn't say, but it doesn't mean people are predisposed toward political violence or actually would endorse political violence. They're just saying things they wouldn't have said out loud before. Well, I don't think it's getting worse. I think it's just we now have a transcript of everything that everyone thinks at all times, and that is horrifying to us.
Right, and I go back and forth between the balance of trying not to be a grandma, like, oh, we're in the worst of times. Like, I understand, we're not in the worst of times. We have a civil war.
Right, I'm pretty immune to this worst of times arguments. Right, for that reason, we fought a civil war in this country. There used to be more, lynchings and
But it's scary when people call for, and Morning Joe were having a dialogue on the panel yesterday about this, that people are calling for a civil war or suggesting it, or like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, oh, we need to like kind of
national divorce.
Yeah, national divorce.
National divorce.
Well, that's like the polite way to say civil war.
I think
you're rationalizing because that is
some positive things that could be said about it.
So what's next then? What's the plan?
Well,
complete chaos.
I am for, I think, fraught political subjects on which there is a lot of disagreement, cultural topics, could be best handled by being laboratories of democracy. Let Texas do it one way, let Illinois do it another. And if you like the way Texas does it, you should live in Texas. And if you like the way Illinois does it, you should live in Illinois. Rather than having to have these zero-sum political battles where whoever wins the presidency, then they get to force their view of abortion or trans issues or immigration or gun rights or whatever on everyone in America. A country of 400 million people with a vast range of political views, of people, vast range of income levels and education levels and backgrounds. And cultural heritages. Rather than make us all live under the same rules, why not say, you know what, you do it your way, we'll do it our way, and we'll see. That's what the idea of national divorce. Let red states do red state stuff. Let blue states do blue state stuff. And I think it's perfectly.
And that's an ideal way to think. If all
as
things
my
considered and all
high
things
school
work out.
Civics teacher would say, don't go away mad, just go away.
But the thing is, like, some people don't actually have the means to just move to Texas or so that requires, then it creates this, caste system where people with the means to get to the state they most like.
People moved across the entire country seeking economic opportunity. People moved from Europe to the U.S. That argument doesn't hold, like my ancestors.
So, like for example,
maybe yours,
the homeless population that we want to rehabilitate in D.C. so to get them off the street, they can just move to Texas if they don't like how they're being treated. There's obviously
I'm not talking
levels
about
to.
them. There's very little that can be done for them except mental institutions in most cases. Mandatory drug addiction treatment, that's a totally separate issue. But don't you think
I just like to
if
consider,
we don't agree,
I like to consider
you can have it your way and I can have it my way, and I don't force it on you?
I wouldn't particularly want to be driven out of
nice?
D.C. because I disagree with your leadership. I look forward to voting in new leadership or campaigning on the side.
Well, that's fine, and you can vote for new leadership in Texas. It's just saying D.C. shouldn't decide how Texas does it, and Texas shouldn't decide how D.C.
So we
does
should have no federal rules whatsoever.
In D.C. Well, we're probably still going to have, like,
you can't be like
one army.
So, like, imagine she's calling it a
what do you mean we can't be partially? That's the system the Constitution prescribed.
You can't be partially divorced. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, imagine, like, me and you together, like, we're partially divorced. What is that? Like, there's too much up in the air right there. That means I can kind of do me sometimes, but we still got to pretend to be
Sometimes
like,
divorce is necessary. After Charlie Kirk's death, some conservatives are aiming to crack down on what they call radical leftism and anyone celebrating what happened to the Turning Point USA founder.
Airlines, schools, and universities, and even some in the healthcare industry have already fired, suspended, or denounced employees' social media posts related to the death of Kirk.
One anonymous website, for instance, says that they're building a database that has more than 50,000 submissions of these kinds of social media posts with the goal of firing people. In the airline sector, political commentator Milo Yiannopoulos posted screenshots of an alleged American Airlines pilot who was seemingly mocking Kirk's death. The airline responded to the tweet, writing, American Airlines condemns violence of any kind. Furthermore, hate-related or hostile behavior runs contrary to our purpose, which is to care for people on life's journey. Any such behavior is unacceptable. We've already initiated action to address this with our team. Then there are plenty of other examples of this across sectors. For instance, local Oregon news outlet KGW8 reported that a middle school science teacher was placed on leave for posting the Charlie Kirk getting shot and dying, quote, brightened up his day. The teacher then resigned.
Now, some Democrats, however, are sounding the alarm. Senator Chris Murphy pointed to this clip of White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller on Fox News.
But the last message that Charlie Kirk gave to me before he joined his creator in heaven was he said that we have to dismantle and take on the radical left organizations in this country that are fomenting violence. That was the last message that he sent me before that assassin stole him from all of us. And we are going to do that.
Now, Senator Chris Murphy responded to that on X, saying, quote, pay attention, something dark might be coming. The murder of Charlie Kirk could have united Americans to confront political violence. Instead, Trump and his anti-democratic radicals look to be readying a campaign to destroy dissent. He continued, the Trump-Loomer-Miller narrative that Dems are cheering Kirk's murder or that left groups are fomenting violence is also made up. There are always going to be online trolls, but Dem leaders are united, as opposed to Trump, who continues to cheer the January 6th violence. Democratic Senator Chris Coons also said this on Sunday on Face the Nation.
The internet is an accelerant. It is driving extremism in our country. It's driving us apart, left and right. And leaders like Senator Langford, Governor Cox, have an obligation and an opportunity to join with leaders from my party in urging folks to set aside any thought of political violence and to respect each other.
Yeah, lots we could say here. I guess let's begin with the canceling campaign.
I was wondering all weekend to talk to you about how you felt about this.
I don't feel very positively about it. I have long opposed cancel culture. I've written over and over again about what was wrong with progressive attempts to cancel people for expressing controversial or provocative views throughout the 2010s when it was the height of left-wing cancel culture. And I've also criticized conservatives who have sought to do the same, try to cancel, for instance, pro-Palestinian voices. I've always said that was a wrong thing. Look, this is a lot of people all over the country. I bet that some of these firings or cancellations or whatever you're calling it are probably appropriate in some cases. Many of them are not, certainly. And I would just in general push back and disassociate from an effort to create, lists of people who are doing wrong things. I mean, I think it's horrific if you're actually celebrating the death of someone, and I think that's worse than a lot of the things that progressives were trying to cancel people for in the 2010s that had to do with, mean or racist or homophobic or sexist tweets they'd sent in their adolescence, where I'm like, who even cares? And if you're a fully grown adult saying it's nice that someone died, that's pretty awful. But again, it depends what you're doing. If you're in a communications role for a major firm or a media person or someone who's whose words matter is the wrong way, who is more accountable, I think, for what they said, or whose position or pay hinges on what you say being accurate and acceptable, then it's more permissible. If you're a janitor or a sales clerk or something like that, and you said in a group chat that you hated Charlie Kirk or whatever, and you lost your job, I think that's pretty needless, and I would not try to punish people that way. So that's my overall thoughts.
And I think overall, for the free speech party to be saying this is absurd, because it's just a case of selective outrage, right?
Well, and it's contrary to Charlie Kirk's entire ethos is the other thing. This was the man who would go to any corner of the country, to the most unfriendly, hostile college campuses. He went to Oxford and debated someone who's now apparently celebrated his death. He was supposed to debate Hassan Piker, who's called for his enemies to die. So Charlie would be the last person to say, debates aren't worth having, cancel people for speech. So in some ways it dishonors his memory to launch this massive cancel culture campaign on his behalf.
And also, if employers like American Airlines or whomever else has fired people based off this because of their moral compass of the company, right? It's like the fabric that they're going off of. You can have this vague overview of what's acceptable and what's not. Then we have to comb through every incident, right? So if people are saying those things that are racist online, like, we have protections against in employment to make equal opportunity there. So like then you should just be firing everybody for whatever they're tweeting or putting on Instagram and everything, because mocking a death is totally inappropriate, but it's still not against the law in the same way that being racist is not against the law, right? And I think that also I was watching and looking at some of the people they were calling out on that list of 50,000. Like one of them works in the military and specifically said something along the lines like, I can abhor the violence that happened to Charlie Kirk, but I don't have to celebrate the way that he lived his life. And so people are upset about her saying that, but that's a nuanced thought that people are allowed to have, that people, the same people that are criticizing her, had about the death of George Floyd. They might abhor what the police officer did, Derek Chauvin, to him, but they do not want to celebrate the way that he was living his life. And that's up to you, right? And I didn't agree with that, but it's like, okay, I don't think you should lose your job because you said that. And I think when we get to the point where the same people that are always outspoken about free speech are doing this, it really bothers me, because I'm looking at what's the intention and the goal. Is it only what benefits you, or are you actually trying to implement policy that's equal to all?
Well, you're too reasonable on all this, Lindsay, because there
I
are a
think
lot
it's
of
just a terrible, sad issue.
lefter-leaning people than you who would be happy to have me lose my job for any number of things I've said over the years.
But the critical thing that also was in this conversation was what Senator Coons was saying, is that the leadership on the Democratic side, I think, from my purview, is leaning into a conversation that is saying that this violent act was totally wrong and nothing of the sort of celebration. And so when we look at how leadership has responded, that's what we can go off of. If we look at social media, sometimes social media can be this beautiful place where we celebrate brilliant things like having a baby and all the things. And then sometimes it can be a real dumpster fire.
Coming around to the idea, just quickly, because we're going to have to go, but social media is our internal monologue. It's your intrusive thoughts being shared, and we all have dark, bad thoughts. But it's healthy to just I'd really like to kill that person. That's just like your.
No, Robbie, I don't have that thought.
I think we all do. Okay, you'd really like to kick a potted plant in blind fury.
Yeah,
whatever.
Like to kick the plant down the road.
You never think about just squeezing the life out of it. But you keep that inside. You don't say it. But social media allows people to actually express their dark thoughts.
And hide behind no pictures
Well,
of
hide
themselves.
behind quasi-anonymity until it's not anonymity.
Right.
And so I think social media makes it seem like we're
the worst of the worst.
We're worse than we are, because you're just, like, if every dark, intrusive thought anyone had ever had was projected for all the world to see, we would look like a very, very fallen
If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Then your mom taught you that back in the day.
That is great advice, Lindsay, and
Thank
I agree
you.
with it.